You are listening to the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast, brought to you by Community Christian School in Tallahassee, Florida.
Hello and welcome to the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast. My name is Tom Augersinger and I'm your host, and my co-host is Kelly Allen. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Tom. On the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast, we explore how we as Jesus followers can connect the dots between education, contemporary culture, and biblical theology, and live like Jesus in this broken and challenging world. And today, we have a third host.
Third host?
Yes.
Never happened before.
It has never happened before. We want to welcome back Miss Anna Nelson. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I've always wanted to host a
Yeah.
show of
now
some kind.
it's like a bucket list thing. Who knew?
Yeah, so you have some questions that you'll be asking us today
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so today we're unpacking CCS's emotional health statement.
Yes.
And so Anna, you've been involved with that. You've gathered information for that, and so I just want to ask you, why do we need an emotional health statement
Fair question.
for CCS?
That is a fair question. So we need an emotional health statement because we have emotional health struggles on campus right now. I don't know if struggles is the right word, but they're present, right? We have them on our secondary campus. We have them on our elementary campus. We have them on our primary campus. And I think it's important in the culture that we're in right now to really spell out what we're trying to do. And in doing that, respectfully make sure that we're staying in our appropriate lanes, that we're doing so that's honoring God, that we're doing so to open space for our families to have conversations and just, write it down on paper so that we can eventually hand this out, have families look over it, make sure that we are honoring our school body.
Yeah.
That's good.
So I would imagine CCS isn't the only school experiencing
Not at
emotional
all.
health issues. So is CCS one of the only schools that are actually doing a statement, or other schools have statements?
That's a good question. I've spent a lot of time talking with schools around the state of Florida as well as outside of Florida. Everyone's dealing with it. I think everybody deals with it differently somewhat, but there are some schools that actually have a statement that's been affirmed by their board, and that's what we have. And so, like Anna said, that was a great explanation. I think it does help give guardrails, and I think that's really what we're looking for to make sure we stay in those swim lanes. But it's a common issue nowadays for sure.
Yeah. So what are some of the main highlights of the emotional health statement?
So first and foremost, just as I said before, everything we do at CCS is within the lens of glorifying God and honoring Him. So if at any point in this journey and in this process we feel a hard stop, that the Lord is guiding us in a different direction, we would honor that. That is our guiding number one principle. Also just really making sure that as we proceed and maybe we bring on new resources or a new idea, as we move forward with that we're diligent in prayer. That our number one goal is to make sure that He, as the ultimate provider and physician, is watching over this, and He is excited about what we're doing. Making sure that those boundaries, myself as a nurse and some other staff on campus who have been trained in emotional health, that we're all staying in those boundaries and in those lanes, because we are not experts in emotional health. I do not have a master's or a PhD in counseling, and to a degree that's a good thing, because that's not my role here on campus, and that's not my role right now. But I also want to meet students in the way that I can to support their emotional health, and then understand when situations need to be elevated to families and other resources. So prayer, making sure that we're doing thing in his mentorship and his guardianship, that he's happy with what we're doing, staying within our swim lanes, and then providing our families with resources in the sense of books that we've read over, and we put out a survey recently asking what our parents wanted to know within the realm of emotional health, And we asked our secondary students too, so that was super insightful.
That's interesting. You asked the students also.
Yes, yes, our high school students. And just absorbing that information, again, in the lens of who we are and what we aim to do. And then if there are resources that we can put out that we have vetted to a degree, that we can give that information to our families, because there's a lot out there.
Yes, there is.
And some of it is fantastic, and some of it is not.
That's right. Yeah, and that's great. I just want to underscore one thing, and that is one thing we've tried to do in the statement is balance, really to begin with the biblical foundations and realizing that we're trying to mentor these kids biblically as we walk through the day, every day. And that doesn't preclude, though, support emotionally in various ways, and we'll talk about some of those ways in a minute. But we always want to start, just like you said, I'm just underscoring, we start with the Word, and it's empowered and illuminated by the Spirit. And then we're not afraid to go farther and to refer out or whatever we need to do, so we're not scared of the topic. We're going to get at that in a minute, I think. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I love that, and I love your statement being illuminated by the faith, because that is so important as we're navigating this. Some tricky words that we try and work around is anxiety and depression and panic. Mr. Eckersinger, what would you say our stance is as far as those words go in our literature and in how we speak to our parents?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's especially important question nowadays because there's lots of different takes on that, right? Should we even be using words like anxiety, depression, all those kind of things? And so I have two quick things to say about that. One, I'm not afraid to use those words when they make sense in the context.
Okay.
At the same time, I think we have to be very careful how we use them, especially with younger kids.
Yes.
I think there's a very clear developmental aspect, because I think what some folks are afraid of that we've talked about is if we're constantly saying these words to kids, we're planting seeds.
Sure.
That's true.
Sure.
And there's not wrong, right? There's a sense in which, especially with younger kids, that can be true. So I think we want to walk that very carefully between. But then again, sometimes it's important to use the word that's describing. Now, to be clear, we can't say to a kid, "You appear depressed."
No.
Right?
No.
So that's a diagnosis.
Okay.
So we can't say those kinds of things. We shouldn't say those kind of things. What we can do is say, there's something emotionally going on right now, and then kind of move from there.
It appears that way.
It appears that way, right? It appears that way because and so that sounds like we're kind of vacillating and waffling. Nope. We're just trying to be careful to honor that person in that moment and to also honor what we know and what we don't know, while at the end of the day, we're pointing them back to Jesus. I mean, that's really where we end up, where we start out, and that's where we end up.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So we've talked to Miss Wolfkill in the past about offering hallway intervention or something if someone's having like emotional meltdown or something like informal counseling in the hallways. Is that something that, because of this emotional health statement, is that something that's going to end? Are we still going to have some type of informal counseling, hallway counseling meeting my child where they're at if they're having an issue at school? Is that still going to happen?
That's a great question. The short answer is yes. Because the one mistake we don't want to make is we don't want to forget that these kids are whole people. Whether we want to discuss or deal with emotional issues, they're there. And when you're in the moment and you're trying to help this young person, you have to, quote, deal with it somehow.
Right.
And one of the ways that we've done that, especially for people that do have some background and some training, is to do what we call informal. So basically, we do call it hallway counseling.
Yeah.
Basically, you're in a hallway.
That's exactly
usually,
what it is.
Sometimes in somebody's office, but often you're just trying to intervene in the moment. Back to your word intervention. Trying to intervene to help this young person move forward because they can't stay stuck on where they are in that moment. We also loop parents in, of course, on those things, depending on the level of severity. But most of the time, we're going to loop the parent in on that. And so, so that's going to keep going.
Okay.
We just have to understand, again, where that line is.
Right.
And we'll have to get additional, more professional help when that's necessary.
Right. I think it's nice to know as a parent that you know there is a line. You know, I don't want you diagnosing my child.
Right. Nor should we.
Right.
Right. We agree with that 100%.
That's good.
It's such an exciting topic, and it's such a prevalent thing right now within school systems, the church, within just friend groups. Being able to openly discuss how we're feeling, that has opened up. And to Mr. Argersinger's earlier point, you know, sometimes those words are used inappropriately or too often. It seems like depression and anxiety has almost, to a degree, become a trend. But I think you said it perfectly, meeting the student where they are. You know, if I have a kiddo who comes to me in the clinic and they're breathing very hard and fast and their pupils are dilated and maybe they look a little clammy, I'm not going to say, that's an emotional, well, I can't tell you that's an emotional health. Go back to class, you'll be fine. There's no fever, so you're good. My goal is to love on that kid. And to remind them of God's word and His provision, and yes, help them breathe slower and take some sips of water and elevate our feet. Like clinically, there are 100% things I can do to help them navigate through that situation. But at no point is it my job or anyone at CCS to diagnose what's going on.
Right. That's right.
It's so comforting being in a gospel-centered school, because you can have a gospel-centered emotional health statement as well. You know, emotional health approach.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really what thanks for saying that, because that's really what we strive for. I mean, we want to make sure that every single area, no matter what the area domain is of the school, we're trying to do that. So yeah, for sure.
Kelly, question for you as my role of second host, third host.
I think she's starting to like this a little bit. I'm not sure.
I do. Okay, so my question is, as a parent, and you have kiddos in several different grades, as a parent, what role do you perceive you play in your child's emotional health? How do you step in, step out, hand over, keep a tight grip on? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's really about staying in touch with your child and knowing the signs of emotional health issues. You know, when is it too much that I can't deal with it and that I need to, you know, utilize the resources, honestly, that CCS could give me, books, and even counseling. When does that next step need to be taken? But that only comes with being in touch with your child. And even if they're small, it's sometimes hard to be in touch with them because of your busy schedule. It's hard to just sit down and touch base with them. And I think that, and always pointing them to Christ in everything, is kind of my approach to things.
Yeah, I guess there are sometimes when that's easier than others, like you said. You know, especially as kids get older, they get busier, and you don't have the same level of contact.
Exactly.
I mean, the statistics are like extremely gloomy. Like the average dad in America actually has a conversation with their kid for like 10 minutes a week. Yeah, which is surely not any of our dads that go to CCS, but you never know, right? But the point is that can be a real problem. So there's a lot of intentionality that's necessary. Another thing that came to mind, actually we talked about this last week with the AI podcast, that one of the things I think we can watch out for as parents also is dependencies. When we sense that and I really want to use that word intentionally, sense, when we sense our kids being dependent on someone or something, we have to really start asking questions, I think. And that could be technology, it could be another person that's inappropriate in some way. But in order to do that, I guess you have to be present enough to know, right? To understand. That's really challenging. It reminds me of conversations we had on this podcast in the fall. You know, it's almost like a theme, I wouldn't say for the whole year, but it's a strong theme. You know, we're supposed to be engaged. And that's, in this world today, that's sacrificial. and difficult, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because even with a small child, like it's playing with them, like taking time out to do dolls with my daughter, and then I get to know her a little bit, and she reveals more of, her emotional health, honestly.
I got to say this, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but somebody's going to go, there's got to be a better, you don't understand all that's going on. So my wife and I went out to have dinner, and we went to this restaurant. It was a kind of informal restaurant. And there were clearly people there who had been at a graduation. They were all dressed up, and they were about that age of kids and everything. And there was a family of 5 that came in and sat at a table right next to us.
I know what you're going to say.
Could not miss it.
Yeah.
Every single one of the 5 people, the entire time they were there, again, we were sitting right next to them, were on their phones, staring at their phones.
Yep.
They looked sad as the day is long.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, what went on before this little gathering and what's going to go on afterwards? And I say that with all really love and affection. I'm not trying to judge them.
Right.
I'm just simply saying, oh my goodness. They literally, I don't think the 2 kids ever said a word the entire meal. And I'm not even sure the parents did. There was like no conversation going on at all. And again, that sounds like me being judgmental, but it's, you can't do that and then be present in a way that's engaging. And I know it's hard, and I'm sure there's a backstory. There's always a backstory.
Right.
But still.
Yeah, it's very easy to not be engaged.
It's very easy to not be engaged.
I'm thinking of times where I'm doing the dishes or folding laundry, and my little kindergartner, she'll just be talking about something and and then I cried and then I moved on, and I'm like, wait. Just rewind, start the whole conversation over. It's so easy to be busy and check boxes through our day, and then before you know it, it's bedtime, and you're like, man, I just missed everything. And we're all guilty of that, but as parents, kind of piggybacking on what you said, Kelly, laying those foundational blocks of the Word is the way and prayer is primary. And also, like, your teachers are cool people. I've always told my kids, your teachers are cool people who care about you. They would not be teaching. They would not be at a school doing the hard work that they're doing if they don't love you and love what they're doing. And for that reason, if you feel like there's something going on and you can't talk to me about it, they love you too. And they are a great resource to just talk to, plain and simple.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things just came to mind, whenever we talk about parents being engaged, it reminds me of a conversation in the fall. We also have to talk about the flip side, the parents that are over-engaged.
Oh, yes.
Well, you said being dependent on things.
Yes.
And I was thinking, sometimes my kids are dependent on me too much.
In a way that may or may not be as healthy over time, right?
Yeah.
Especially as they get older.
Right.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of wisdom and discernment, right?
Yes.
It's like we were saying last week, another theme, right?
Yeah.
Wisdom and discernment for all of these difficult things.
Yeah.
Hovering is not the answer.
Yeah.
It
just feels like
isn't.
it sometimes.
It feels like it is,
Yeah,
right?
I learned in the fall
is
the term,
hard,
lawnmower parent.
Yeah. Well, there was
Like paving the way.
helicopter.
There's helicopter, there's lawnmower.
There's all sorts of different ones. But I mean, all the statistics are super clear on this, that it is not good for
It's
kids.
not
Right.
good.
But yet there's something in folks that want to continue to do that. We unpacked some of that actually in the fall, right?
We did.
talked
I
about
learned a lot.
So we can go back and listen to some of those podcasts. That would be good. Yeah. Well, okay. That was such a good discussion.
It's certainly a false sense of control that our kiddos' decisions and lives are in our grasp.
Yes.
And that is not the case.
That's right.
He holds them so tightly.
Yeah.
And we play this small of a role in it, although very important.
I know.
It's really annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But wait, I love them.
Tom, I have a question for you.
Yeah, boy. Here we go.
Okay, what are the theological perspectives on emotional health?
Oh gosh, it would take so long to unpack all that. So I'll just try to talk in a few generalities. I think it's rooted in the book of Genesis. I've come to realize through my work with the Colson Fellows program that pretty much everything connects back to Genesis in a very powerful way. A lot of the cultural narratives we deal with, as far as identity, as far as sexuality, as far as so many things connect back to God establishing an order for the way things should be. The other thing is, and then out of that comes this four chapter story, God's story, creation, fall, redemption, and then restoration. And it's important to we tend to, as modern Christians, we tend to leave off the first one and leave off the last one and focus on 2 and 3, fall, redemption, which is obviously super important. But it has to be rooted in the creation story. It has to be rooted in God's work in the world, in creating out of nothing, and then saying, this is the way it's supposed to work. And then Jesus come along saying, yes, and here's the kingdom, and the values of the kingdom, and the way it's supposed to work. And then this idea that all things will be restored one day when Jesus returns, and in the meantime, we get to be a part of creating these little pockets of mercy, where the kingdom is working. It's not perfect yet, but it is working, and that gets us to the emotional health question. Because ultimately, I personally believe that human beings know intrinsically something isn't right. And we just deal with it better. Some deal with it better than others, and some people have different ways of seeing it that helps them understand it. And of course, I'm going to put aside for a second the issue of people who have of significant clinical diagnoses, okay? So I'm not really talking about that group of people. I'm really talking about the people who struggle with what we might term the lower level of anxiety and various other things, and just deal with emotional health on a daily basis, but they still basically go through their day. I think a lot of it that is rooted, and frankly, it's things that I've certainly worked through in my own life. It's not like I don't understand what this is all about. And certainly people in my family have worked through this at various times. My extended family have worked through this a lot. It's rooted in a misalignment, I think, with God's created order, which includes where the solidity of our identity lives. And so there, just in simple terms, we are God's. We belong to Him. He created us in His image. We are His image bearers, as marred as that image is. And that matters. That really, really matters. It's not like, oh, who cares? Well, if that's actually true, man, then that just changes everything. Because now we have we have a standard to say, this is the way this is supposed to work. This is who I'm supposed to be like. We often used to say back in the day, and we still say it sometimes, especially with older kids, when we interview parents, we ask them the normal questions, but then we ask them a question like this: what would you like your kid to be like? Not what job do you want them to have, or how much money do you want them to have? What do you want them to be like?
That's
what
good.
kind of a person? And it's interesting the responses you get, because I can't tell you the number of parents who have said, I don't know. I've never thought about that. Really? And that's what we're talking about here. So having a standard, I think, is one thing. The other thing is walking with the compassion of Christ. Because at the end of the day, we all struggle. It just is the way it is. It's a result of the fall. It will all be made right one day, but in the meantime, life is hard. It's like the old Amy Grant song way back in the day. Life is hard and we all need Jesus. Yeah. That's pretty much true, right? Boom, done. I mean, that's pretty much it. And so, right, exactly. So, and there's so much more that can be said, but God's order tells us, and the kingdom shows us how we're supposed to be in the world and what we're supposed to be like, and how we can be like Jesus in that through the power of His word and the illumination of the Spirit. So, there's a lot more could be said about that. So one of the things I want us to, as we begin kind of moving towards a close here, is I want to talk a little bit about where do we go from here with this discussion? 20 months of discussion, and I'm sure there are people out there going, that's all you got? So after 20 months of discussion, it sounds a lot like the way it was. It's like, well, yeah, it kind of is a lot like the way it was, because we weren't doing it too badly at the time, but now we know more of why we're doing it that way, which is always nice, and there's a few other things that we are doing differently. So, but what Anna, from your perspective, where do you think the future of this discussion might go from here? Because we're not done.
We're not done. I'm so excited about what we have done in 20 months, what God has done in 20 months. One thing that we haven't really talked about is we've been really blessed by someone who's come to our campus and kind of done some emotional health training with our staff in the way that we just serve as teachers and as administrators, as the school nurse, making sure that we can recognize and identify certain behaviors and traits. And then if there is a time to accelerate, if there is a time to get someone else involved, that we would push that to the parent and encourage it. So I'm excited that our teachers are now equipped, and all of us really are now equipped to a degree with that training. I'm also excited that this conversation is still going, that we don't say like, hey, we recognize there's an issue and we're gonna help your kid breathe and get through some situations, and it'll be great. No, this is an evolving topic, just like physical health. Our emotional health is evolving through stages of life, through culture, through our broken world. And I think you said it perfect. Like at the end of the day, our bodies are broken in a lot of ways, but hope, right? There is, He is supreme. He is our provider, and we're going to keep going. We're going to keep trotting and looking for His guidance. And as I said before, if there's a time where that feels like we're overstepping, we'll stop and just follow His lead. We would like eventually to have a panel just like we did earlier this school year, where we will have almost a flip side. We'll have some pastors and biblical perspective on emotional health. I'm really excited about that. And invite our families to listen and ask questions. But, God's still moving, and we're going to keep following. And I think every encounter we have with our kiddos is hopefully training them up to be receptive and empathetic and I had a hard day here, and so helped me through that day, and I'm going to help them through that, and I'm going to glorify God in the process and remind them that they have a great, great Father and a great community,
that's just so important, so central, so key. One of the things we're just taking it one step further, one of the things we're having a lot of conversations around right now is kind of combining what we're doing on the emotional health side of things, combining with some of the continuing upgrades for our medical health response in the way we do some of that, and kind of putting all that together in what we're going to call the Imago Dei health program.
Okay.
So it's really rooted in that Latin phrase, which means in the image of God. And it harkens back to Genesis 1 and 2 and 3. And that's really, I'm very excited about that because I think it gives us a better platform. It gives us a way to talk about it. And the very name of it draws us back to what I think at the end of the day is the central issue of this whole thing, which is being made in the image of God as an image bearer. So it occurs to me when you were talking that I think it's kind of true of almost everything we talked about this year, is that none of those discussions are actually over.
Right.
No.
Right?
How could they be?
Yeah, how could they be? Because it's the human condition, right?
It's always evolving.
It's always evolving. You think about the crazy conversation last week about artificial intelligence. You think about just that is talk about evolving.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just whoosh.
Yep.
So it's so complex.
But Christ is the same.
Yeah, Christ is the same, and His Word is the same, and we can count on that. And that's the Bible uses that analogy of the rock for a reason.
Right.
He's not going to change, and that's a really, really comforting thing. It really, really is. Yeah. So, boy, what a great time. So, I want to give you guys the last word. With 3 hosts, every host should have a last word.
Oh, goodness gracious!
You didn't tell me that.
I know this is all I've lived. So. What would you say? Let me put it this way: what would you say to a parent with a student maybe who is apparently, to their understanding, having some sort of emotional struggle? How would you encourage them?
I would encourage them that, number one, they are equipped with the Holy Spirit. That they, as a parent, have that firm foundation. That it does not change, it does not waver, it does not grow weary. And that even though it is a difficult time, that they can be that person for their child. I would also tell them that there are going to be situations in their own life and people they know in their children that they need a little bit of extra help. And that might be another mentor or or church leader or teacher or school nurse that can just help them find tools, coping strategies, breathing techniques. And then I think finally I would tell them that their kiddo is strong and loved, and in getting through this, they are going to make, a powerful soldier one day for his army.
That's good.
Because when you go through this stuff and you come out on the other side and you remember that hope and love and God's sovereignty, you are ready to go to battle for each other, right?
That's good. How about you, Kelly? Maybe a last word from you on this.
I'm honestly just so blessed to be part of this school community where you guys are having these conversations, where we're having these conversations, and you invite parent input. I've learned so much as a parent through my involvement with CCS. So I've always been like a CCS fan. So that's my last word. Thank you so much for everything y'all are doing.
It's great. And I guess my final word before we close is just to say, as we've said so many times, it's like almost another one of those themes for this year, and that is we want to walk in faith and hope and love and not in fear. Because walking in fear doesn't do any good. And so, but walking in faith and hope and love, and sometimes you have to do it by yourself, sometimes you have to do it by yourself, but it's easier when you're walking with somebody. And that's what we're trying to do with CCS. So, well, again, we just thank you so much for you guys taking the time to listen. And if you forget everything else that we have said today, please, please, please remember that Jesus Christ is Lord. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast, brought to you by Community Christian School in Tallahassee, Florida. You can find us online at myccs.org.